Good morning, everybody. We hope you're doing well. I'm here with Ellen,
Hey everyone.
and we are discussing the topic of awakening and what that means. Most of us would say that we are all spiritual beings, that we all, you know, have this connection to God, that we, have had a spiritual experience. So, what does it mean to have an awakening? What does it mean to all of a sudden have the inner being of someone come alive? Ellen, do you have any thoughts on that?
I guess I would say for me that my first spiritual awakening was probably about 27 years ago.
Okay.
And that was when I came to the knowledge of Jesus and came to the knowledge of that there was actually a connection between me and God. I had pretty much lived most of my life kind of doing my own thing without thinking about spiritual matters, without thinking about divine things. And so for me, that was the first thing, was an understanding of the need for Jesus. I think over time though, in these last 27 years, I've had different times where there's been awakening. And I think when I think of awakening is basically when something supernatural happens in your life and you're just all of a sudden, your eyes are open, your ears are open, you come alive, you realize that what you thought was is now not. And so I think right now I'm in a very present day type of awakening.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah, I would very much have to agree. I think I had my very first awakening at the Billy Graham Crusade in St. Paul, Minnesota, back in the early 90s.
Wow.
When I was in 7th grade. And it was just all of a sudden there was something in me stirring that I had never felt before, and there was this desire to know God, desire to know about God, desire to understand God a whole lot more, even though I had grown up in the church.
Sure.
Even though you hear things on a regular basis, all of a sudden it was like a light bulb all of a sudden had turned on.
Yeah.
And that awakening continued. And it's interesting you talk about different other awakenings as we venture into life, as we venture onto this journey with God. I had multiple other awakenings that I never even realized you could have, which caused more depth, more intimacy with God. And even awakenings into, I guess, the charismatic movement or the gifts of the Spirit, if you want, those awakenings. And awakenings with even to traveling to so many other nations and meeting different people, seeing different ways of life.
Yeah, and being under cultures, like being outside of the U.S., I think is an incredible thing. And I think there's not enough Americans that take trips and do long-term stints overseas, because then you're amongst different religions, you're amongst different cultures and people groups, and how they relate to God is very, very different. And I think for me, I've just really, really enjoyed looking at the way the Native Americans worship God, the way that the Buddhists worship God, the way that the Hindus worship, they have many gods, and how they do all that and what it all looks like. And I think I'm discovering more and more and more that I can find God in all of those areas. And I think that that's probably for me one of the greatest awakenings of all, is that God can be found in other spiritual practices, other spiritual traditions, that it's not just Christianity that has the corner on the market for God. And I know for me, it's just knowing that every person is connected as one with God already, that they are not separated already, that they have the earmarks and the fingerprints and the hand of God upon them, caused me to really just search deeper and say, okay, does Christianity have it all together? Does Buddhism have it all together? Does Hinduism have it all together? Can I learn from all these different spiritual traditions and find God in all of them? And I have found God in all of them. It has expanded my belief system. It's caused me to definitely be less judgmental, of people, because I don't think I just have the right way. I think that there are many different ways that we can encounter God.
Interesting. So, going back to on a personal level,
Yes.
What does the awakening do? Because I think for me, the awakening was realizing that there was more to me, more to me in the eyes of God, and how I am viewed by God, rather than how I
Yes.
am viewed just at a surface level by other people, or how I am viewed by those closest to me,
By the church.
by
Yep.
the church. Yep. But ultimately, how does the awakening affect how we should see ourselves in light of how God sees ourselves?
You know, it's interesting you say that, because I think like my first set of awakenings that I had with God were about how God views me, but not all of those awakenings led me to a deep place of knowing how I viewed me. And there was still this separation between how God viewed me and how I viewed me. And so I think what's happening right now for me anyway, and I can say that it's helped me, is it's helped me to embrace my humanity more. It's helped me to embrace and love myself despite faults, weaknesses. I'm still growing, obviously, in self-esteem, still growing in understanding, that I'm loved and that I can love myself despite things. But I think for me it was not just, the first ones were about a returning to the understanding of God. Now I'm in another place where it's about a returning into understanding me and what I'm about and who am I as a human. That being a human is fantastic in God's eyes. I think sometimes, like for example, the church teaches about Jesus, and he came and they say he was fully man and fully God. And sometimes there's still an emphasis on the fully God part. And we don't really focus on that he was fully man, which means he lived in a body, he walked the earth like we walk, he ate like we ate, he met with different people, he did life. And so I think for me, what it's done is it has just caused me to really, honestly, Jared, become normal, kind of pull off the spiritual hats and kind of embrace my humanity and be okay with my humanity, that my humanity is beautiful, that this body I'm in, that my mind is beautiful, that my emotions are beautiful, and I can find God in all of my humanity, but it's also me being okay with my humanity.
Yeah, I think you're right, Ellen. I think that at times we don't, you're right, we overemphasize the